Ashton. All right, so my topic, as you see, is power in numbers with a question mark. Question mark. That question mark is very important. And you all may have heard the term or the saying that the more, the better, correct? We've all heard that term, the more, the better. And the assumption is that the more of something there is, the better it must be. For example, if there's two events going on and more people go to one event as opposed to the other, the outcome or the assumption would be that one event which had the more or the most people was a better event because more went to that event. Agree with me or not? Even as men, young men, we are taught that if you have or have been with a lot of women, then you're more of a man than someone who has been with less women. Right. I know I've been told that, and before I got saved, that's partially how I live my life. Amen, somebody. All right. Even when it comes to money and things of that nature, we assume that someone that has more money has a better lifestyle. Even in this own country, the United States of America, which is considered the powerhouse of the world, the country with the most money, most people look at this place and they say that they want to live here because they look at the money that is generated by the United States of America, and they assume that where they're from is not as good as the United States of America. We even experience that sometimes in church. That one person may give $1,000 and another person may give $10, and we assume that the person, or we say that the person that gave $1,000 gave a better offering. Even when it comes to comparing churches, that if there's two churches across the street from each other, the church with more members is considered to be a better church. But don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that more is always bad, but we have that assumption that more is always better and that less is sometimes worse. So I'm going to point you tonight to a familiar text. We've all have heard many sermons or messages or what have you on this particular text. This is a very familiar Sunday school text. And this is a text that deals with numbers. And I would just like for you to turn with me to Judges chapter 6. We all are familiar with this story of the person of Gideon who faced the Midianites and Amalekites with 300 men. 300. While the Midianites and Amalekites had thousands. We are familiar with this. So I'm not gonna do the comparison with numbers or the battle with numbers. We are familiar with this, but I'm gonna read a bit much from this account going on with chapter 6 and chapter 7, just for us to understand what is taking place. So Judges chapter 6, starting from verse 1. Then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. And the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel because of the Midianites. The children of Israel made themselves the dens, the caves, and the strongholds which are in the mountains. So it was, whenever Israel had sown, Midianites would come up, also Amalekites, and the people of the east would come up against them. Then they would encamp against them and destroy the produce of the earth as far as Gaza, and leave no sustenance for Israel, neither sheep nor ox nor donkey. For they would come up with their livestock and their tents, coming in as numerous as locusts. So there were many of them, that came up against the children of Israel. Many of them. Both they and their camels were without number, and they would enter the land to destroy it. So Israel was greatly impoverished. This is a group of people who God promised or gave them a promise. Said that they will or go to the promised land, and now that they're in a time for 7 years because of sin, they have absolutely no productivity. They are impoverished. So Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. And it came to pass when the children of Israel cried out to the Lord because of the Midianites, that the Lord sent a prophet to the children of Israel. So as they cried, the Lord now sent the prophet to them. The Lord is now speaking to them, who said to them, "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of bondage." So they brought them out of Egypt. They brought them out, or the Lord brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, and now that they are in another situation which someone would consider to be bondage again. So they are in bondage again. "And I delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of all who oppressed you, and drove them out before you and gave you their land. Also I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But you have not obeyed my voice." Say they are in this situation because they have not obeyed. I'm going to jump to now verse 14. Then the Lord turned to him, and this him is Gideon. Gideon. When he was underneath the tree, the Lord spoke to him. Then the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you?" So he said to him, "O my Lord, how can I save Israel? Indeed, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." So when the Lord told him that by Gideon's hand he would deliver his people, he then questioned, or he had doubt in what the Lord told him at this time. He had doubt. "And the Lord said to him, Surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat the Midianites as one man." Surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat the Midianites as one man. Surely, one man. Someone look at your neighbor and say, surely, one man. Now we're going to jump to verse 34 in the same chapter. "But the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon." Now this is taking place after the Lord spoke to Gideon and told him to destroy the idols that the people had made, and now Baal has risen up, or the people, the Midianites are now, or has risen up against the children of Israel. "But the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon. Then he blew the trumpet, and the Abiezrites gathered behind him. And he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, who also gathered behind him. He also sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they came up to meet them. So Gideon said to God, if you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said. So he's reminding God, if you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said, look, I shall put a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. So he's reminding God of what he said. How many of us have ever been in a position where God has said something to us, where God has said that he would use us for something, where God has said that he would do something through us, and we still question God? How many of us has been in that situation? How is it that most of us have faith or believe in God in general, but we sometimes do not have faith or believe in God in particular? See, we sometimes, or God has these these images or titles or personalities, whatever you may call them. God is a healer. And we believe that. We believe that God is a healer. So we believe in God in general that he's a healer. But when it comes to God saying that I will use you, I would use you to lay your hands on someone and heal them, we then lose our faith, or we have a lack of faith because we don't believe God in particular. How many of us have ever been in that situation? So now this is what Gideon is facing right now. So he was in a situation where God told him that his people will be set free by his hand, and now he's doubting God or questioning God. Let us continue. Still in verse 37. Look, I shall put a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece only, and it is dry on all the ground, then I shall know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said. And it was so. So when he rose early the next morning and squeezed the fleece together, he wrung the dew out of the fleece and a bowl full of water. Then Gideon said to God, do not be angry with me, but let me speak just once more. Again, after he tested God, now he's testing him again because he still lacks the faith in God in particular. Then Gideon said to God, do not be angry with me, but let me speak just once more. Let me test, I pray, just once more with the fleece. Let it now be dry only on the fleece. Let it now be dry only on the fleece, but on all the ground let there be dew. And God did so that night. It was dry on the fleece only, but there was dew on all the ground. Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him arose early and encamped beside the house of Herod, so that the camp of the Midianites was on the north side of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. And the Lord said to Gideon, the people who are with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel claim glory for itself against me, saying, my own hand saved me. So Gideon gathered a group of people to go fight, or a group of people joined Gideon to go fight. But God is saying that you can't take that many people. Because if you take this many people, you would say you did it with your own strength, you did it with your own might, you did it with your own power. So let me cut this down. Let me cut this down some to a number where then when you go up against them, you can say that maybe this was God, or this could only have been God. Only God. Only God. Verse 3 now. Now therefore proclaim in the same hearing of the people, saying, whoever is fearful and afraid, let him turn and depart once more from Mount Gilead. And 22,000 of the people returned, and 10,000 remained. 22,000 turned away because they were afraid and fearful. Afraid and fearful. But the Lord said to Gideon, the people are still too many. There's still too many. Bring them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. Then it will be that of whom I say to you, this one shall go with you, the same shall go with you, and whomever I say to you, this one shall not go with you, the same shall not go. So he brought the people down to the water, and the Lord said to Gideon, everyone who laps from the water with his tongue, as a dog laps, you shall set apart by himself. Likewise, everyone who gets down on his knees to drink. And the number of those who lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, was 300 men. But all the rest of the people got down on their knees to drink. Then the Lord said to Gideon, by the 300 men who lapped, I will save you and deliver the Midianites into your hand. 300 men. So he reduced the number from 10,000 to now 300. So 300 men now has to face 100 or a little over 100,000 men with 300 men. Power in numbers. Power in numbers. Verse 8. So the people took provisions and their trumpets in their hands, and he sent away all the rest of Israel, every man to his tent, and remained those 300 men. Now the camp of Midian was below him in the valley. It happened on the same night that the Lord said to him, "Arise, go down against the camp, for I have delivered it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down, go to the camp with Purah your servant, and you shall hear what they say, and afterward your hand shall be strengthened to go down against the camp." Then he went down with Purah his servant on the outposts of the armed men who were in the camp. Now the Midianites and the Amalekites, all the people of the east, were lying in the valley as numerous as locusts, and their camels were without number, as the sand by the seashore in multitude. And when Gideon had come, there was a man telling a dream of his companion. He said, I have had a dream. To my surprise, a loaf of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian. It came to a tent and struck it so that it fell and overturned, and the tent collapsed. Then his companion answered and said, "This is nothing else but the sword of Gideon to the son of Joash, a man of Israel. Into his hand God has delivered Midian and the whole camp." So Gideon, encountered a messenger who had a dream, and now he's telling him about the dream. And it was so when Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation. I read all of this just to get to this one part. Just to this one part. And it was so it was when Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation that he worshiped. He returned to the camp of Israel and said, "Arise, for the Lord has delivered the camp of Midian into your hand." All this just for this one point. That as Gideon is preparing for battle, to go up against thousands of men with 300, that Gideon was not able to start battle or able to fight until the point in time he came to worship. After God had spoke to him multiple times and said that the people will be delivered by your hand, it was only that point in time where Gideon bowed down in worship that he was able to realize that he would have victory at that very particular point. It does not matter how many times God may tell you that you may overcome something, that you may get through something. It does not matter unless you're able to bow down in worship, because when you bow down in worship, then and only then God is able to have his way with you. When Gideon bowed himself down in worship, only then he surrendered himself. He surrendered himself. He said, "God, I know you have said this, but I am not prepared. I am not ready. I have to submit myself. I have to surrender myself. I have to bow myself down. I need for you to have your way with me. I know that you said that this will be done by one man, but the one man needs to be you inside of me." Gideon had an attitude of worship even before battle. So I'm here to tell you today that even before you engage in battle, you must put on the atmosphere or the garment of worship. You cannot overcome the enemy. You cannot overtake the enemy, regardless of what God may have said to you. Before you bow down and worship God, you cannot have victory in your situation. Your victory is locked up in your worship. The warrior inside of you is locked up in your worship. But there's two things that go hand in hand with this situation here. two things. If you're not ready to cut some people off, if you're not willing to say that this person must go, this friend must go, this brother may go, this sister may go, if you're not willing to say that, if you're not willing to do that, then you are not prepared for battle. You're not prepared. You're not prepared. You are not prepared. You're not prepared. So worship comes, or worship must come, before you engage in battle or conflict, regardless of the promise. Regardless of the promise. Regardless of the promise. If we continue on to verse 16, it says, then he divided the 300 men into three companies. Then he, who is the he? Gideon. Prior to this moment of worship, the reason why I read this lengthy text is for you to understand that prior to this encounter of worship or this moment of worship, the Lord the whole time was telling Gideon what to do. The Lord himself was telling Gideon to do this. But that moment where he worshiped, it was no longer the Lord telling Gideon what to do. He was then empowered with instruction on fighting this battle. He was empowered to tell his men what to do. He did not have to rely on the Lord saying, Gideon, do this. But the moment you bow down in worship, you then become empowered to fight. You then become empowered to tell your army what to do. You then become empowered. You don't need instruction from God. He is inside you. He is living in you. He is dwelling within you. And you are able to move without any instruction. God, you do not need him to say anything to you. You become empowered. You become empowered. Empowered. He empowers us. We no longer have to wait for instruction. We are able to move. We are able to strategize. We are able to strategize without waiting for instruction. But the moment that you make a decision that you're ready to cut some people off, in the moment you make a decision to worship, that's when conflict comes. That's when the battle comes. That's when the warfare starts. Turn with me to Mark chapter 1, or the Gospel according to Mark. Gospel according to Mark. Chapter 1, verse 16. And as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Then Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." They immediately left their nets and followed him. When he had gone a little further from there, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and John his brother, who also were in the boat mending their nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat. They left their father in the boat with the hired servants and went after him. Then they went to Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and taught. and they were astonished at his teachings, for he taught them as having authority and not as the scribes. Now there was a man in their synagogue with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, saying, "Let us alone. What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Did you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be quiet and come out of him." Be quiet and come out of him. James and John on a boat with their father. Jesus comes to them. He says, "Come, follow me. I'll make you fishers of men." And then they go, or Jesus goes into the synagogue, and these disciples follow with them. And a man with the unclean spirits comes forth. The very moment that James and John decided to follow Jesus, the very moment they decided to follow Jesus, the very moment that they said, "I will be a disciple, that I will follow you." This is, don't get it confused here. They did not just follow him. This is an act of worship here. When you become a disciple, it does not mean one who just follows, as we have been taught. It means one that is able or willing to change their thinking. So if you're willing to change your thinking, you're willing to submit your thoughts, you're willing to submit your thinking under someone else. So this is a form of worship here. So the moment that they decided to worship God is the moment that they encountered someone with an unclean spirit. The moment that they decided to take up and follow Jesus, the moment that they decided that my thoughts are not, I'm not going to deal with that anymore. I'm going to follow this man. I'm going to follow this man with power. They encountered the enemy. The moment you decide to worship, don't get it twisted. When you worship, you're not just saying, "God, I praise you." It's more than that. The moment you decide to worship is the moment you decide that, or the moment that you say that I am ready for warfare. The moment you decide to take on or follow Jesus, the moment you decide to really follow him, the moment that you decide to trust him, the moment that you decide to say, "God, I want you to live in me," the moment that you submit yourself to God, the moment that you say, "God, I want you to have your way in my life," the moment that you surrender your will to his is the moment that you will encounter the enemy. Don't think that everything will go right when you decide to follow him. Don't think that everything will go right when you decide to say that I submit myself to you. You will encounter the enemy at this very moment. These men did not know what they were doing. They left their father, a man they trusted. They had to walk away from some things. They had to walk away from some things. Walk away. They had to walk away, and they had to worship. What are you willing to walk away from? What are you willing to walk away from? See, the numbers don't matter. The numbers don't matter. It doesn't matter who you have with you. If they don't have God, if they don't have Jesus, if they are not empowered by the Spirit of God. See, in the story of Gideon, let's get it clear. God told Gideon that his people will be delivered by the hand of one man. The 300 were not the men who bowed down and worshiped. It wasn't the 300. One man bowed down and worshiped. One man bowed down and worshiped. And not only was he empowered, not only was he given power, but those 300 men were now given power just because of one man. Just because of one man. Because one man decided to submit himself to the will of God, the whole 300 men were now able to take on thousands of men. One man. One man. So the power is not necessarily in the numbers Or not, I'm not going to say necessarily the power is not in the numbers. It's not in the numbers. Contrary to what the world may tell us, the power is not in the numbers. Power comes from one source and one source alone. And you only are given the power from that source when you worship. It's all about your worship. It's all about your worship. Jesus was teaching in a synagogue with multiple people. Multiple people. He also called 4 men with him prior to this. And one man stood up and cast out the unclean spirit. One man. One man. Let us continue on to Mark chapter 4. Starting from verse 35. On the same day when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us cross over to the other side." Now when they had left the multitude, they took him along in the boat as he was, and other little boats were also with him. And a great windstorm arose as the waves beat into the boat, so it was already filling. But he was in the stern asleep on a pillow, and they awoke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. But he said to them, "Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?" And they feared exceedingly and said to one another, "Who can this be that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Then they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes. And when he had come out of the boat, immediately, there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. So again, we have another encounter where Jesus and his disciples are on the shore preaching, or Jesus is teaching the multitude of people. And then Jesus says, "Come, let us go to the other side." And on the other side was this person with an unclean spirit. When his disciples were there on a shore with Jesus teaching the multitudes, some of his disciples were from this particular area. They were from this particular area. So I'm pretty sure some of the people that was on the shore were people that they knew, people that they grew up with, even family, people that they were comfortable around. But Jesus then said to them, "Come, let us go to the other side." And then they made a decision to leave what was familiar, what was comfortable, what they knew. Made a decision to leave that to follow him. And then when they make the decision to leave and follow him, what did they experience? They experienced a storm. Not only did they experience a storm, once they got through that, once Jesus rebuked the wind, they then experienced another man with an unclean spirit. Warfare again. Again. The moment they made a decision to follow. The moment they made a decision to follow. The moment they made a decision to follow. Chapter 5, verse 2, and when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one combined him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces, neither could anyone take him. And always night and day he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. And he cried out with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me." For he said to him, "Come out of the man, unclean spirit." Then he asked him, "What is your name?" And answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." For we are many. The reason why I am speaking from this text today is to get to one major point. And the point that I want to address with you today is that, yes, I've addressed you leaving people, leaving what is familiar, worshiping God to be empowered. But the reason why I am saying this, because as a body, as C.O.R.E Ministries International, we have been, over the past few weeks, we have been given a responsibility. A mandate has been placed upon this ministry. And that mandate has been evangelism. The mandate has been placed upon us for go out into the streets, for us to take over this city. And if you look around, our numbers are smaller than what's outside. Our numbers are way smaller than what's outside. Last Saturday, when we did our first day of evangelism, only 7 of us were out. 7 of us. And after reading this text, I now was able to understand why many of us was not sent that day. Not only that, I also was able to understand why when our apostle gave us this mandate, that he was clear to us to say that whenever we go out to speak, we must be sure that when we speak, that we are not speaking, that God is speaking. Because it does not matter the numbers that we go out with. We have to be mindful that we are dealing with a city, or we often in this ministry address the principalities in this city. The ruler in this city. The prince demon of this city. The numbers are larger than us. But I'm here to tell you today that our power is not within our numbers. We must cut some people off in this season in order for you to be empowered. If you want to pick up this mantle of evangelism, you got to cut some people off. You got to say, brother, sister, whoever you may be, I cannot go with you. I cannot do this with you. I must do this alone, or I can only do it with people that are going to be able to bow down and worship with me, that you may be able to be empowered to impact this city. That's the only way that we can do it. That is the only way that it can be done. It doesn't matter if it's 2 of us. It doesn't matter if it's 2,000 of us. If we do not have the power of God behind us, if Jesus Christ is not living within us, the battle is lost. The battle is lost. The battle is lost. It does not matter what the promise may be. You cannot do anything. Anything without being empowered by the Spirit of God.